Okay, hey everybody. Today we are going to be working on Hydrocal and casting plaster and stuff. I've got the lens buck right here. I printed this over the evening, and it fits inside of the shell. Just got to take the shell apart a little bit here because it fits so snugly inside the curvature that it you have to take it apart first. But yeah, so basically this is the inner surface of the lens. This will be the top layer of clear plastic that you'll be able to see out of. But in order to get that clear plastic, I'm going to have to vacuform it, which is what I do for all of my other Spider-Man lenses. So basically, what I have to do in order to vacuform this under plastic lens here, so this is going to be the lens for my shell. I could, you could try just putting this on a vacuform table. If you just printed it solid plastic, which would take like a month and a huge roll of plastic, it would print solid, and you could probably vacuform it. But like I said, that would take like a month and take a ton of material, so you can't print solid. And if you try to vacuform something like this, that's plastic, thermoformable plastic itself, the heat and the vacuum pressure will actually collapse the plastic. So you actually need either a really thick layer of plastic, or what I'm going to do, I've basically printed this thing hollow. What you can see is that it's got all of these inner chambers here that go straight up to the upper surface. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use Hydrocal, which is like Plaster of Paris. If you've ever, done one of those projects where like a little kid puts their hand in Plaster of Paris and it makes an impression of the hand, it's a really simple material that humans have been using for thousands of years. Here's this shoe sole plaster mold that I made several years ago for ASM2. And it's been, as you can see, it's been used a lot. It's got a crack right here from when it broke one time, but I just stuck it back together because this is a shoe sole. It's even got little missing chunks of the webbing detail and stuff. That's because when you cast latex into plaster, the latex actually gets into every little nook and cranny and grabs onto it. So when you pull it out, you're probably peeling a lot of plaster with it. So every time you cast latex in a mold like this, it just destroys it little by little by little. But yeah, this is just Plaster of Paris. That's why it broke down the middle here. Plaster of Paris is something you can get at craft stores and stuff. I actually put popsicle sticks in the back of it, and the popsicle stick fell out, and then this one wasn't far enough up, and that's where it found that break point. But like putting things like popsicle sticks and things like that into it, and also you can put like burlap and fiber and plaster bandages. These are plaster bandages. Plaster bandages are basically like what they use to make casts on arms. It's basically just plaster infused inside of this sheet material, kind of like a gauze material. And so when it gets wet, it will harden in whatever shape you put it in. So this is really helpful for making molds, and we'll do more with this for making a bust of your head, a pretty affordable bust of your head, because you need that if you're going to sculpt your own face shell for yourself. Now what this is Hydrocal. It's not the same as Plaster of Paris. It's a lot stronger, and it's a little more expensive and hard to find. I actually bought this at Reynolds, the same store that sells like plastic and silicone and all that stuff. They sell mine at least sells a bag this big for about $40. So all of this, it's really, it's a 50-pound bag, I think, and it goes a long way because you're mixing it with water, and the ratio is about 2 parts plaster to 3 parts water, I believe. But most people just eyeball it because the eyeballing is kind of the best way to cast it, and also the best way to measure it. Also, to kind of talk about this shell a little bit, one of you commented on it. This will be available, but I'm starting a business where I'm going to be making shells and stuff like this, but I'm not going to be giving away the code for free. I'll be selling the STL files. It's not going to be like super expensive. It'll be similar to like my print, Spider-Man dye sublimation print files. Just a nominal fee that, I get compensated for the work that I put into this, because this only took me an afternoon to design after I uploaded the photogram of the shell it was based on. An afternoon to design. That was Sunday afternoon, I believe. And it's already printed and in reality. It's so fast. I could be easily making a new variety of shell once a month. But I'm only going to do that if, I get a little bit of compensation for my time. So I'll probably be charging a little bit of a fee for each of the shell files. But it's going to be, this was probably about $10 of plastic. Filament usually works out to about $10 per pound of plastic. And I'd say this is about a pound. And you can even, it's going to be a lot less plastic too, because I didn't even design the air holes or the, holes in the shell itself that'll kind of lessen the material. Yeah, I showed this earlier, but I'll show it again. I'll put this in here so you can kind of see it all together. But yeah, so this is as far as I've gotten on my shell yet. So far, I'm still not going to talk too much about the designs, because I noticed on Instagram I was tagged in a post of someone else that's working on a moving lens, and sure enough, like a day after I mentioned that a lot of other makers have really deep sunken in lenses, this other maker goes and makes a post about how his next task is to make the lenses less sunken in. So I think people are kind of possibly poaching these streams a little bit for information. So I'm still not gonna go too far in depth. I've already given a lot of information here. I think it's gonna be kind of difficult, unless you have good design and 3D printing skills, to kind of catch up to me quickly here, because I'm kind of on a roll. But yeah, so what this is going to allow for is just all of the moving and stuff once I have that cast as the actual back lens, because it works as a good just base for everything that's going to be happening. And it's not too sunken in. And also, a thing to keep in mind right now is the actual lens is going to be further out than this. We're talking about really, really tight thresholds here. So all of the space you see, I don't know how well you can see the gap in here, but that gap is very specifically designed. That's a very specific threshold I've got going, and it's going to be even thinner because the plastic that's getting vacuformed is getting vacuformed on top of this. So the plastic is about 1 millimeter thick itself. So we're talking very specific thresholds here, but it's going to be really cool once it all gets together here. So back to casting Hydrocal and Plaster, in case that's what someone is here specifically to look at. I always get a little off tangent in my stream/tutorials, but I like it. It's kind of like a podcast tutorial, where I talk about the thing. I'm talking about Plaster, like my knowledge with it. You guys are allowed to ask questions, and the good thing about that is, every time I've filmed a tutorial, I leave out really necessary information that I wanted to share, and it doesn't get shared. It gets left out unless I make another one. Yeah, and that's the coolest thing about this is, since this has all been 3D printed, I'm basically going to be able to sell the moving lens shell. Before, I was going to have to construct each one of these by hands, and you guys know me. I don't do that. I don't do that well at all. Every time I've been tasked with just constructing the same thing over and over in a kind of job format, it just doesn't happen in a timely format. It's kind of like the only time I can be this super productive is when it's a new, exciting, I'm not sure if it's going to work or not. That pot of gold at the end of the rainbow is sometimes one of the only things that gets me going on this stuff. But that's so exciting. Before, the only way this would get out is if, I did the tutorial and taught you guys, but then you'd need your own face shell like this. But now, since this is just all 3D printed, even the inner lens and everything, and then the lens components are all just going to be the folder, cut up folder. So all you'll really need is the outlines for those, and then you'll cut them yourself. You'll assemble everything according to how the shell has it, because also in the next version of the shell, I have to drill a lot of holes for hardware and things like that. I'll just have that designed straight into the shell. You'll print it and get the hardware, and that's it. I mean, you just need to assemble it and like a model ship or something, and so you'll have that kind of pride of ownership. And it'll get out there. I'm just excited. I've never really gotten my stuff out there before, which is what has always, depressed me, frankly. That I make cool stuff, but I can just never get it out there in a large scale. And this is kind of the solution to that. And so, this is the MCU version. I can understand the confusion. I think the chin needs to go up a little bit. I designed this on my head in the program. I think the chin needs to go up a little bit, and I think it could be a little rounder. I know it looks like the eyes are close together, but you have to keep in mind that there's frame and then there's iris, so it actually starts to separate pretty quick. And I've done a lot of testing, and I've learned to trust the test. Do the testing. Do it with like mocked up like lens things, and actually do measurements and stuff. That's what I did. I actually measured the distance on the mock-up that I liked, and that's the measurement I have here, pretty much exactly. And so I have faith that based on how I liked that mock-up, that'll look good. So I can change it at the end, but so I'm glad that this is all getting accessible, and it's cool. And I love this stream because after Spider-Man is done and everything's cooled down, there'll be something new that everyone's excited about, like, I don't know, some new Stormtrooper suit in the new Star Wars movie, although that one's not coming out on Christmas. Anyway, I digress. I'm kind of getting distracted here, so I'm gonna go back to plaster and casting and stuff. So a few things about casting plaster. You just mix plaster, the powder, with water, which I've got over here, 2 buckets. This is the bucket that I'm going to actually mix it in, and then this is an extra bucket that you keep to kind of just wash your hands off, because your hands are going to get really messy from plaster, and it's good to just be able to wash them off without having to go to the sink over and over. Another important note: if you have like a bucket of plaster or something like this that's in a mixed bucket, that it's like currently wet plaster, never just pour it in the sink, because it can get into the pipes and then cure and then wreck your pipes. So you have to be really careful about plaster going into, even if you just have like a water bucket that has like powdery plaster at the bottom, you have to be careful about that going into your pipes. Just always really careful about plaster and sinks and stuff, because if you didn't know and you didn't think about it, you have to wash stuff off and clean it. But if you're getting a lot of liquid plaster down your pipes, it can cure, because it's a chemical reaction that cures plaster. So it just can cure once water is mixed, and it'll do that in your pipes, and it's really not good. And you can reuse your plaster buckets. I've probably used this one a million times. You just kind of have to like crack up all the plaster. If you're doing a really delicate mold, like right now, I'm just strengthening this mold, and then I'm going to sand the front to get it really smooth and shiny. But if you're doing a mold where you're molding like a helmet or something, so you can have like a statue or something, you might not want to reuse your bucket, because you can see in here I've got a couple little like flakes from last time, and that kind of stuff might stick to the surface of your mold and make bubbles or just make an inconsistency or something. So you might want to do something like that. Another thing, I think I've mentioned this in streams before, get tarp like this. This is just a paint like liner for when you're like painting a wall or something, but it comes in these giant 10-foot wide rolls. So all of this is 10 feet wide. And since I only need, a little bit of space, I could basically just use half of this square and use the other half later. But it's only a couple bucks for this whole roll. You can get it clear or black, and it's really, really handy stuff to have, because it's just, you never want to make a mess, and it's always nice when you can just kind of pick up your plaster and or your tarp, and then that's basically the only cleanup you have. Especially with plaster, because if you splash liquid plaster around, like on carpet or hardwood floors or something, it can cure and ruin it. So you just have to be careful. I say so many warnings about ruining stuff as like payment to all the things I ruined of my parents growing up building stuff in like the basement. And man, one time I was heating something up with a heat gun, and I was so stupid. I just put it right on the carpet, like, a kind of thicker shag like carpet, and I put this like piece of plastic that I was heating up right on the carpet, didn't even think what was around it. And this was my first heat gun, and it just roasted the carpet immediately underneath the thing that I was trying to heat up. Just an immediate, and it was the worst. I mean, you can't clean a melted carpet. It just made this one melted spot, like right. It was so bad. Like, I've done so many things like that you just have to be really careful and respectful of your environment. Because I mean, that's got to be one of the worst things about being a parent, is having a crazy kid that just ruins stuff like that. And what can you say? They're being constructive. All right. That's a great noise. There you go. There's your inception moment right there. Well, it'll take a second. It has to catch up. Pretty funny. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And so if you haven't, if you didn't watch from the beginning, what I'm doing with this white plastic is I'm making a Vacuform buck, because, being so hollow, the Vacuform machine, the heated plastic would just melt this thing. It would just crumple it. And, I learned that the hard way. You have to kind of keep that in mind. And so it's time to measure the amount of plaster I'm going to need. I'm not going to directly fill this, because I've also learned that if you're making a buck or something, and it might not be as much of a problem here because it's got so much structure, running through it. But one time I tried to do a face shell, and the face shell was basically hollow on the inside, and I just poured like solid plaster inside, but there was so much pressure and weight from the plaster that the whole shape kind of bulged out. That was this last summer, actually, that recently, because I thought the plastic was sturdy enough. I had cast it pretty thick, but the weight of the plaster is so much that it made it bulge out and balloon out, and that affected the shape enough that I couldn't use it. I had to start over. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm not going to just fill it. I learned that the more appropriate way to do it is to do coats. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix together this Plaster Hydrocal, and it's hard because with Hydrocal especially, you have to give it a long time to kind of begin its chemical reaction before you do a kind of slush casting like that. But I'm just going to cast it anyway and do it a little faster. But yeah, so I'm just going to do a kind of coating, like a slush coating inside each of these chambers, making sure that I really don't have any bubbles, because any bubbles at the bottom is where it might compress from the vacuum pressure and the heat. So I don't need a full amount of plaster for the inside of this thing. So I'm going to do a little less water even, because you'll be surprised when it comes time to mix. Most people will tell you to mix just with your eyeball, to eyeball it. Well, Degsy just asked, how would we get the buck on Shapeways? Well, Shapeways is going to be hard because Shapeways is going to be really expensive. Shapeways charges a lot. So I'm really going to encourage everyone to just get their own 3D printer and get proficient at just printing stuff, because I'm going to just start designing stuff and keep designing stuff. And this was $10, like the whole shell of filament, like about $10 worth of filament. Shapeways would, I actually looked on Shapeways. This is like $175 of plastic on Shapeways, just this shell. I mean, it doesn't have any of the holes or anything like that, but it's $10 versus $175. And $175 is how much the printer that made this costs. So it really is like simple math, I think. Even if it's difficult, if you struggle to make things, even you're on Shapeways, you're going to have to still like assemble, do some level of assembly. And then also, I think a solution for people who are afraid of printing and stuff is that there are going to be people out there who have their own 3D printers. And what I want to do is the same thing that I am doing currently with my prints, my dye sublimation prints, is if you want to do commission work on my shells, all I ask is that you pay the kind of the commission, the cost for the file to me for every one of the commission shells that you do. So basically you could charge your fee for like putting the whole thing together, like whatever, $200, $300, $400, as long as you're paying me the commission fee for the file, for the STL file. I'll be totally okay with that, because it's a little bit thrown my way for the design and everything, and then that solves my issue of being able to construct it. You'll get the lion's share of the money. You'll be the one making more of the money because you'll be doing the construction and everything. All you'll need to do is get a 3D printer or two and start constructing them, and then people like it sounds like Degsy doesn't want to do any Vacuform buck stuff. So if you were to make a simple Vacuform machine like I have, you'd be able to make that. And I mean, the demand for this is going to be pretty high, I think, if it looks as good as I'm hoping it will. And I'm pretty excited about it. So far, everything's coming out really well. I don't foresee any major issues kind of stopping anything at this point. One thing, this shell is too small for my head. I designed it on my actual photogrammed head in the computer because I think I have a bigger head, and I think I have a pretty good shaped head for Spider-Man. Most masks kind of look good on my bigger sized head. So I based this shell kind of on the shape of my head, but because of that, it's too, like back here, it's too tight, and then on the chin too, it's too tight on my chin. And so I actually kind of need, for my own purposes, a shell that's like 5 or 10% bigger, just to be able to facilitate some of the components and stuff. But for on a mannequin head or a regular person-sized head, I think it'll be just fine. So that's why I'm going forward with it anyway. So yeah, that's to answer some questions. Yeah, I thought about that. Derek mentioned that if I were to Vacuform it, it would make it slightly larger. And yeah, I've been considering that pretty heavily, doing basically exactly what I'm about to do with the buck here, but just covering these eye holes essentially with something sturdy enough, and then also giving it a coat, a smooth ramped shape at the bottom. That's key for Vacuforming, because if I were to just stick this on my Vacuform table, the plastic would suck underneath here and grab onto it. It would suck into the eye hole. Like, you really have to keep in mind how the plastic's going to grab the mold underneath. So I have considered that, and then also I really might do that because there are a lot of reasons why that's good. It's a little thinner, it's all one piece, so it's actually so much stronger for facilitating the moving stuff. It's going to be strong enough. I think this is definitely going to be strong enough because this is solid plastic. It's actually pretty sturdy. And I'm surprised how well these little puzzle pieces have ended up working out. The little puzzle piece tabs here. It's got some tape at the nose. But like these ones up here at the top, that's how it's only connected here. And I mean, it's crazy how easy it is to just kind of, like a puzzle, snap one together, and then snap the other together. Oh, come on. I just had to sand it a little bit to get that to work. But yeah, it's pretty crazy how well that ended up working. Because I've worn it, and it holds it in place pretty well. It's not very smooth here. I think you'd still want to glue it and sand it and everything, because that'd make it a lot stronger too. But you need to reinforce it a little bit on the inside, which is also something I'm going to incorporate into the design itself, so that they're kind of reinforced together a little bit better. Because one thing that happened with this one, sorry, I'm way off topic here, but one thing that happened with this one, the nose and the other part of the nose here don't line up incredibly well, because I think it's because this shell was printed with the nose up in the air, and there was just such a slight error to the printing that it printed the nose kind of slightly off to the side compared to this bottom piece here. So I'd have to kind of like orient it or something, or just sand it down to a nice shape. But that's this shell, this 3D printed shell. So I'm pretty excited about it. Yeah, CAK comedy. I've already kind of talked about it. But yeah, I'm going to have the STL files available, but they'll be for a fee for the files, based on whatever is fair. Okay, so back to plaster. Time to measure. So this is how you eyeball plaster when you're measuring. Sorry, way off topic there for a long time. To eyeball plaster, like I said earlier, plaster is usually 2 parts plaster to 3 parts water, so 5 parts total there, but that's kind of hard to measure. So basically people just eyeball it, and this is a good way to mix it as well in order to not get clumps in the plaster. You just kind of rain the plaster down into the water, not letting it kind of fall like clumpy, like flour, because plaster is basically a similar material consistency as flour, so you don't want to just kind of clump it all at once. Also, I'll say wear a dust mask for this too, or a respirator, because I don't know if you can see it, but there's all kinds of super fine dust coming up here, so I should really be wearing a respirator, but I'm not, or a dust mask at least, because that's the kind of stuff you just really don't want. Because think about what plaster does. It gets up into your body. Plaster cures. It, cures when it mixes with water, so you don't want it to get up into your body and do that. 1 second. Yeah? Well, the CAK comedy said, respirators are for wimps, I'm a man. Well, you'll be a man for less time. That's basically the bottom line of it. You'll get some crazy lung disease and regret it. You won't get it until you actually care about wanting to live as long as you can. Okay, so I'm still just adding plaster, and you'll see that it's kind of raising the water level, and I'm going to be adding plaster until it starts to kind of form little islands at the top of the water. That's when you know that the water is just totally infused with plaster, and vice versa. They're just so perfectly mixed. Because as the plaster mixes with water, air comes out and it absorbs in, and you want the 2 volumes to be basically like perfect together, and that's how you get it that way. So you can see that it's starting to kind of plateau and create a little island. It'll keep sinking, and you want to move evenly around. You don't want to just create like one big island up in the middle. So you can see it's starting to kind of stack on the plaster underneath and fall in. It's still falling in, and you can see I'm making a ton of plaster. That was just a tiny amount of water. That's why I emptied some of that water out. I knew it was going to make too much. A little plaster goes a long way. And this is Hydrocal, again, if you missed me saying that. You can find it at Reynolds, or like building supply stores will sometimes have it. Art stores, like sculpting stores, because Hydrocal is really big for like pottery and sculpture. It's just one of the strongest casting plasters out there. Okay, so it's starting to look well mixed here. You can see it's starting to create these little swamps where the water only barely is above the level of the plaster. And that's how you know you've basically mixed it pretty flawlessly. Well, not mixed it, you've measured it pretty flawlessly. Oh yeah, also, I've got more people watching now, so I want to mention that I think the streams are too early. I keep noticing comments of people missing streams, so I'm thinking I'll probably move the time back like 2 or 3 hours. So I would be starting at like 6 p.m. my time, 6 or 7 p.m. my time. I'm not sure. Maybe you guys can let me know how that works for you guys, like what time that would be for you, because that 6 o'clock for me, that's Pacific time, 6 or 7 Pacific time, whereas I start 4 my time now, so moving back 2 or 3 hours, if that would work or not. So let me know either way, because it would help me a little bit too, because I'm always kind of rushed to get all my materials together and stuff. Okay, and so when you've got it mixed like this, you can see that it's pretty perfectly proportioned here. You can see that it's like, looks like a little crackly swamp, plaster swamp. And what you're actually supposed to do here is just let this sit for like 5 or 10 minutes. You just let it sit, and you let the plaster just absorb water and really absorb into each of those little clumps. And that's what begins the chemical reaction that happens in plaster. You might think because of the water that, it's drying, but plaster actually gets really hot, and that means it has a chemical reaction happening that makes the plaster actually harden. So basically you let this sit for a few minutes. In the meantime, Project Filmmaker had a question. Will you be doing the mouth hinge method for the mechanical lenses, or will you be using a motor for the lenses? For one, I don't know what the mouth hinge method is. I think that's funny. I mean, it's good if people have gotten that, but I don't personally think that would be the best method. I think people thought I did that, but it's funny because it's actually in the video I was chewing gum. the Spider-Man video I had from WonderCon last year, I was just chewing gum, and then I also squinted the eyes at the same time, and so I think people saw that in the video and thought that my jaw was how I was controlling the eye lenses, but that's not how it works. And then as far as motors, like if you were to do like stepper motors or little actuators, I mean, that would be possible. I just don't know where I would put them for myself on a Spider-Man costume. Maybe someone with like a really, really tiny head would be able to fit all that stuff into a face shell and not look too ridiculous, not look too much like a big old watermelon on a popsicle stick, but I just don't see that as being the right way to do it, because the way I'm going to do it works with puppetry and cables and stuff, and I'll get more into that once I've got my own working version, which is what I'm working on right here. This is a step towards that. I wanted to have one done for today, but of course, the printing took time. I didn't incorporate that into my plans. One thing to know about me, if I've got plans for the future for something, they're probably going to be way off. I need to start under promising and over delivering. Anyway, so mine's going to be just all like puppetry based, and the eyes are going to be individually operated. I wasn't able to do that on the last one because there were some unforeseen issues that I've since solved, but in this one it's going to be separate eye movement, so it'll have a lot of puppetry, and so I'm really excited. And the other thing is, with motors and steppers and stuff, that's got to be at least several $100 in just the components of like having a duo board and all of the components and wiring it all together. Mine is like probably $20 or $30, not including the shell and the lenses, but the hardware is probably like $20 or $30 total. So it's really the way to go.
I'm excited to talk more about it. I just can't give all the secrets away because I'm pretty sure there might be some poachers out there watching these streams. Okay, so I've basically waited here for a little while. You want to wait a long time and let the chemical reaction, start to begin. But I kind of want to, get this stream going here, so I'm just going to go ahead and start mixing it. And I just like to use my hands. You got to be careful because plaster can dry out your skin, and it can also, I wouldn't want to get it up into like a cut or anything. It's not that bad though. And the reason I use my fingers is this is a good way to find if there are any clumps of powdery plaster that haven't been dissolved. I've gotten basically all of them. There's a little bit in the bottom. So now this plaster is essentially, it's really milky and well mixed. And so what I've learned about Hydrocal and Plaster of Paris are a little different in that Plaster of Paris will just start to heat up right away. Its chemical reaction happens really fast, and it's a little less hot, I think, just to be safe, because Plaster of Paris is the type you can buy at Michael's or any, arts and crafts store. So that's why, I use that for a long time. It's just more likely to break. It's not as strong as Hydrocal is by a lot. And so the reason for that I say that is you need it to kind of heat up a little bit and begin its chemical reaction, because that's when it'll kind of turn into more of a paste. Right now it's milky, it's more of a milk consistency. And then once it's allowed to sit and do its chemical reaction for a little while, it will turn into a lot more of like a paste. You'll be able to actually kind of like scoop it out, and you can kind of sculpt with it a little bit, and it'll be in that state for quite a while, like 30, 40 minutes, and then it'll start to harden as it progresses there. And so I'm just waiting here, because if I put it basically directly into the mold now, it will be good. Yeah, it'd be good because it's going to get into all of the little nooks and crannies really well, but it's not going to be super thick, so it's not going to do as well of a like slush cast to support it. But I'll just go ahead and start kind of pouring a little bit to test this. I've actually never done this, so bear with me here as my phone slips out simultaneously. Oh wow, that's neat. It's just filling each of the little chambers. That's so funny. Oh man, that works really well because it keeps the plaster from kind of acting as one solid force of pressure. Each of these little cups is its own little self-contained thing. That's so funny. That worked really well. Basically, this was just a setting on the printer on how much of an infill. That's what this is called. This lattice structure in here is called the infill. And that's something, this was just a solid model, and that was an option I selected in the 3D printing slicing program that makes the model printable on a 3D printer. You give it what kind of printer you have, all of the specifications, and then it does all of that. So that actually worked really well. I actually could just fill this thing probably and not have to worry too much about the shape getting deformed. One thing I'm curious about is if the plaster is going to leak at all, because the 3D print might not actually be super perfect. Not like super solid. It doesn't look like it's leaking very much. Yeah, and it's really holding its shape. It's not like loose or anything. Wow, yeah, that worked really well. So I think that's the future of, I think if you're interested in getting my stuff in the future, this might be something you'll be doing, because it was so easy to print this buck. This is the buck essentially. So I'll put this onto my Vacuform table and be able to turn it into clear plastic, basically the entire outer shape here. And so, that's kind of one of the biggest problems right now as far as, you need someone to make lenses for you. Well, if you just make the Vacuform table, which I've done in a previous, well, I didn't make it in a previous stream, but I used my Vacuform table, and my Vacuform table design only cost about $30 or $40 in materials. So I'll do a stream where I make that as well. And so it'll be all really accessible, and then you'll also have the skills to do it yourself. So I'm just really excited about all of it. This stream is basically turning into my like infomercial for all of that. So I'm not going to have enough plaster to actually just fill every chamber. I could mix more right now. Yeah, I might just have to do that. Just mix more plaster. So wow, maybe if I hadn't poured that extra water out, it probably would have been just perfect. Oh well, I hadn't anticipated to be just filling it like this. I still might not. I might just let it get to a pretty cured state, because that's how a lot of like pottery, people who do pottery, what they'll basically do is they'll mix together the Hydrocal like this, and the Hydrocal will start to cure, depending on the mold, it'll start to cure from the outside inward, and once it's cured a certain point, you just dump out the liquid Hydrocal, and then you're left with just an inner wall of what has cured so far. And then you've dumped out your Hydrocal into another mold, and so you've started making another pot. And so that's how they've used Hydrocal for thousands of years now. It's just a matter of learning that yourself. See, I missed a chamber here. Either I missed it or it just got poured out. It poured in there and then poured directly into another chamber. Yeah, really the wall chambers are all that matter past a certain thickness. And I actually don't want it to be too thick in the middle, because I have to drill air holes. And basically what that means is if there's anywhere in your Vacuform buck, like say I'm vacuforming a Spider-Man face shell, and I need the vacuum to go into the eye holes a little bit, if it was a solid piece, you'd have to actually drill holes, because the vacuum pressure, once the top is sealed off, the vacuum pressure doesn't act on that little pocket anymore. You have to drill holes in your actual mold itself so that vacuum pressure is inside of the eyes. And so I'm going to actually have to do that on this one in such a way that the air holes will come up into these little chambers, and the vacuum pressure will act on that. And as long as there's enough plaster in all of the outer cells, and then enough in the actual middle, it should work out. I'm still going to probably need to cast more plaster here. What is happening is that I'm casting the Vacuform buck for the moving lenses plastic part, the clear plastic part, because you can't 3D print clear plastic lenses, unfortunately, not yet. You can 3D print with clear plastic, but it never is like super shiny and see-through, because you need a really smooth surface for that, and Vacuforming can do that really easily. Okay. And I'm just, I'm trying to strengthen all the little walls. I'm going to need to mix more plaster either way, I think. Yeah, I'll just do that. Yeah, it's been recent enough that I'm not too worried about that plaster that's still in there. And I'm using this is just a piece of styrofoam from my Annette A8 printer. I basically just cut that little groove into it. I just picked it out with my fingers, and that's there to keep it supported while it
cures. You know, those little walls are kind of, you know, supporting it up, so it's not just sitting there and kind of having to keep itself up. Because as I add this weight, it's you know, kind of wanting to balloon outward a little bit. But thankfully, the structure really prevents that. The structure is really keeping the shape all throughout. So that worked really well. I think that'll be the way for making all of my lens bucks in the future. Okay, so I don't want my hand to be wet at all when I get it into this plaster bag. Otherwise, it'll make dried up clumps of plaster inside of there. Any moisture that comes off. So who's excited about Guardians of the Galaxy? Who's seeing that tonight? I want to go. I don't know anyone else that wants to go see it, though. At midnight. Okay, so I'm pouring more plaster here. Same process as before, just letting it kind of rain down into the water. Hopefully that's not shaking the camera at all. Looks like it might be a little. I need to 3D print a new camera holder for my face so that it doesn't shake around as much, now that I know pretty much right where I need the camera to be. And these are just 2 red Solo cups that just live in this bag of plaster. They never go anywhere. It does look like a waffle. Good observation. It's like the same purpose as a waffle, too. They're all little syrup traps, as Dane Cook would say. Pancake with syrup traps. So, out of curiosity, who actually has a 3D printer out there that is watching right now, or any plans of getting a 3D printer? So I'm just curious, kind of what the current state of it is. Degsy just said, "Can I just order the clear lenses from you?" Yeah, I might for sure be doing my own sales of the clear lenses, but I mean, I'm just saying, based on my own personal experience of construction, when it gets down to a lot of construction for me, it just falters. I'm so bad at setting the time aside, or you know, whatever it is, to get it done. And so construction I just always falter on construction, no matter what I change. So I really think that if you're not going to be able to do it yourself, someone watching here will be able to start constructing their own and doing a commission system for their own shell. This is going to be funny. I think I might just basically mix these 2 batches together and then re-pour it, so that I don't have like 2. Well, it won't matter that much. They'll mix together once I pour it here in a second. I'm being kind of sloppy here. Plasters, I mean, it'll cure. It might take longer to cure, but it'll cure. I'm not too worried. All right. So I'm getting these outer cells first. I know I'll have enough, but I still want to get them. All right, that's great.
I'm gonna fill these two. It's not quite symmetrical. You can kind of move your infill design around inside of your model by moving your model around inside of the program. Oh, that's cool. That's right, CAK. You've got your 3D printer. Yeah, basically everyone needs to get a 3D printer, I think. They're just so awesome. And if you're here watching this stream, that means you are interested in this stuff, even marginally. The 3D printer is just so awesome. And it's so affordable now, too. For under $200, all of this stuff and more I've made already with that amazing thing. I spilled a little bit of plaster on the side there, so I'll kind of wash it off a little bit. That's why I put tape around the edges to kind of give it a rim, and then also make sure that the plaster doesn't drip over to the edge and then cure and be kind of a hassle to deal with. But I'm not too worried about it because I'm going to be sanding the front anyway, and so it actually kind of works to have a little bit of a filler. I'm going to need to put filler on it anyway. All right, so now all I need to do, I actually want at least one of these holes to not be super deep because I'm going to have to be, actually, yeah, you know what, I'll do it from down here near the nose. Because I need, like I mentioned before, if you have a detail that the Vacuform table might not be able to get into, you have to drill holes so that the vacuum pressure gets into those details that the plastic cuts off. So it's kind of hard to describe that without like a graphic to describe it, or without showing you a shell. So that'll probably do well enough. And the plastic is so porous that I'm pretty sure that Hydrocal will have no problem sticking inside of there. It's not like any of those little cubes will fall out or anything. No, Degsy just asked, will the plastic honeycomb stick out when you sand it? It's kind of already sticking out because the printer had to print this pattern on every layer. It kind of had stops in a weird way at the edge where it meets the edge, so you can kind of already see the honeycomb pattern on the surface of the print. And once you start to sand, you'll use filler and stuff first. You'll use like body filler and primer to fill the gaps, and then once you start to sand, you might potentially go through the plastic or something. But this, like I was just saying, the plastic is so porous that the plaster will really cure, will really get in all of those little nooks and crannies and cure. And then also what I can do here is really kind of jostle it. That probably jostled my phone more than anything, but just really, disturb it here and get all of those little bubbles that might be at the bottom. And so it's just one chunk of plaster, essentially, at this point. The plastic and the plaster kind of become one. They'll sand at different rates, which will be a little tricky. But I don't foresee going that far through the plastic, honestly. I don't think I'll ever sand through the plastic into the plaster. I'll be smoothing the plastic surface out, and then I'll add filler, and then, kind of continue that process until I have the glossy, smooth surface I need. And then I might even have to just cast it at that point, just for the sake of getting that glossy surface. But I'm excited to try this and just see how it works out. So cool. This is going to take a long time to cure. It takes basically overnight to cure, at least several hours, like 12 hours. In my experience. And I haven't been working with Hydrocal too long. I actually worked with Plaster of Paris for a long time before, someone was like, well, why aren't you working with Hydrocal? And that was at Reynolds. And they told me that they had Hydrocal. So I just didn't know where to get it. Or even the fact that there was such a difference in the materials. Because a lot of my Plaster of Paris stuff, I mentioned this earlier in the stream, but this is Plaster of Paris, and there's a crack running along here because the whole thing snapped in half. If it was Hydrocal, that wouldn't have happened. And also, it probably wouldn't be as dilapidated. This little webbing detail that's broken wouldn't be broken.
because Hydrocal is just a lot stronger in little areas like that. And so I always use Hydrocal now, and I recommend everyone else do too, because it's also very affordable. Before the 3D printing process, I did a very similar thing, which is why I kind of just jumped straight into this. Before the 3D printing process, I did a similar process with my old shells. Here, let me grab like ASM2, that'll work. With like my ASM2 shell, I did a plastic cast of the outside basically. So like these days, this would have been 3D printed essentially, and then sanded and refined. And then I did the exact same process I did just now, except instead of just filling it, because I learned the hard way, when you've got this much surf area, plaster amount, like I filled all of this, and that's what made it bulge out because it was just so heavy. So I learned that you have to do layer upon layer of plaster, and then I stuck a PVC pipe in there once I got up to like a thick enough layer, and then continued to do layers, so the PVC pipe is basically bound inside of there, so it's nice and connected. And that's the difference in strength. If this was plaster of Paris, this probably wouldn't be strong enough to support it, but here it definitely is. And this is also a good example to show you what I meant with those little holes. So that hole right there, that hole right there, those are there because when you put the mold into the Vacuform machine, the plastic goes over, and then the vacuum seals off this eye chamber. So there's no more vacuum pressure in here. It would just kind of cover it like a saran wrap or something, and just do as straight a flat covering as it could, because it's been cut off from the vacuum pressure. So what those holes do is they go all the way through the model. There's one down there, both sides right there. And then they bring the vacuum pressure into this eye chamber so that there's vacuum pressure here as well. So it's also being sucked down. And so that's why I left, that one looks like it kind of just filled a little bit. I might just kind of have to drill down and then drill up from the other side to meet them. But, that's why it's kind of hard to just do solid plaster for a reason like that. But yeah, so that kind of demonstrates some of those other things I had talked about. And then I just kind of really sanded along the edge with a rasp, because Hydrocal can be kind of tough. But yeah, so that's another good way to have the all of it be vacuformable. So I'm considering basically doing the exact same thing here. The only thing is there are a couple things I want to change about the shape that are just a little off, I think. And then I might end up doing that. But for the future of getting it out there, if you want to print your own or have someone print one for you, you'll definitely be able to do that. And I love it. I love how accessible it's going to be. And then I also designed the whole back of the head too, and even the ear covering. It'll just be a matter of figuring out how those go together. But you'll be able to print that yourself, because I know some people have a problem where it drops off here and looks kind of weird. But then also you can resize it too. So if it's too big for your head, you can just buy a different size shell, because I want to release like a large, medium, small, or maybe just a large and small scenario, but have it resized. And then also even a kid size, because I know the kids are into it as well. I just don't know how easy it's going to be to fit all the mechanics and stuff into that. But yeah, so I'm excited. And once I have this all vacuformed, I can start constructing or assembling the hardware to get everything working. So yeah, really, really soon I'm going to have another version of the moving lens. I also need to finish that mask that I'll have it going on top of. That's something that's been stopping me for a while. I just need to get that done one way or another, because it has to have a mask that it connects to. It doesn't have magnetic lenses like you're used to with another Spider-Man face shell. That's why it doesn't have anything inside of here. The lenses basically have to work that way. So yeah,
Cool. I think that's good enough for a stream on Hydrocal and Plaster and stuff. And it's getting pretty hot in my garage anyway. So, hope you enjoyed. Well, that's cool. CAK said that he got some lenses out of a $10 Walmart thing. And Matt asked how the ASM 1 and 2 shells are going. The progress is going slow for sure, but that's part of why I haven't gotten this. So, I didn't have a moving version done for this. I'm trying to split my time, but I'm really, I'm not doing a good job right now. I'm not doing a good job of splitting my time effectively. And so I'm realizing that to get myself kind of out of this split time hole I'm in, I need to kind of just focus on one thing at a time. And so I keep bouncing around because I know that means I need to focus on your shells, get you guys your shells because you've been waiting for so long. But then at the same time, Alex, who won this moving lens shell, won that a year ago, even before I sold you guys your ASM2 shells. So I just keep ping-ponging back and forth on what should be my number one priority. And then also, when it comes to my future and kind of my social media presence, this is definitely number one for me because the movie's about to come out in 3 months. The ASM 1 and 2 movies came out so long ago, and I mean that's not even fair for me to say because you guys bought the shells and it's an arrangement, it's an economic arrangement we entered where I said I'd give you the shells, so it's so stupid for me to make these excuses. But yeah, I definitely need to go and cast mesh right now. I need to just get a lot of mesh cast. It's a little tough because my molds are also starting to fall apart, so I need to invest time in making some new molds for stuff. A lot of ways, it's just it's also hard because it's well, then it's going to be so much easier, I think, in the future to just get shells out, even like ASM2. I'm going to get the ASM2 shell designed in 3D printing format. It's shouldn't I be putting my time into that so everyone has that accessible right away? But, I definitely need to get the dozen shells left I have to do done. They've been hanging over my head for months. And yet, I just still don't do them. It's crazy. Yeah, you get it, Degsy. Wubba lubba dub dub indeed, as far as those shells go. So yeah, we'll have those done. I mean, I'm getting work done on all of them, and getting progress done at least. One of the worst things that happens to me, and you guys will probably remember this from a majority of the last year, is that when I get into that state that I was just talking about where I'm I don't know what my priority is, and so I kind of just ping pong back and forth, it's I don't even get the work done on this. I just do nothing essentially. The ping ponging back and forth, I don't know, it's so tough. It can be really, really difficult. Which is why I'm just I'm so done with constructing stuff. I know you guys want your stuff and you have the best intentions, but I can't. I think it's important to recognize when something isn't working and to move on. Yeah. May the 4th be with you. That's funny. Oh yeah, and I'll always update you when you ask. Sometimes I miss email messages, which is really unfortunate. I need to send an email to Eric right now. He's wondering where his shell is. But I definitely always want to update you. It's just hard when I don't have as much of an update for you as I'd like. I just need to sit down and focus on getting that stuff done. But the problem is that for me, even to get the dozen plus shells I have done right now, that'd probably take me 2 months of just solid work to get those done. And that's when this movie comes out, so I'd miss it. I kind of miss the premiere, just sitting and working on all the shells. But I mean, obviously I have to do that. That's my thought process essentially. I have to get those shells done, but I also have to get this done. And so that's why I just don't want to yeah, that's funny. So yeah, that's basically it for today's shell and my little rant about my current predicament with face shells and why I want to get this 3D printing shells going. I want everyone to just be printing their own shells. No more me making all the shells. No more. And I mean, I say that, it's like I don't even make any shells. It's crazy. Yeah, and I love these streams. Matt just said he likes the streams. I appreciate that, and I love the streams too, because the streams kind of keep me focused. They keep me coming back every other day. And I'm really sure, or well, not really sure, but I'm happy now that I'm going to be doing like 2 streams a week. I think the weekend stream is just a little too awkward and difficult to schedule. But I think Tuesdays and Thursdays at like 6 or 7 o'clock my time. So moving it back like 2 or 3 hours, and then doing Tuesdays and Thursdays will keep it so like regular and give me enough time to prepare stuff to talk about, and kind of being a little more yeah, well, unfortunately that's not true. S Green, you kind of came in, I don't know if you came in right after my little shell rant, but I just finished saying that I'll probably never really like sell shells in the way I've sold them in the past, because it's never been successful for me. I don't really have any intention of starting a business around it, like hiring a bunch of people, and the things about starting a business around intellectual property you don't own. That's really scary. And so it's one of those things where this is definitely the solution, I think. It's hard for some people maybe to foresee getting a 3D printer and doing this themselves, but I definitely think this is the way to go for going forward. Because then I can design a new shell every month, and rather than sitting and building each shell by hand, I'll be designing new and better shells. So I think that'll be exciting, and a good way to just get the work out there and get out of this traffic jam I'm in my head, essentially. Like, I've just been stuck for such months and months and months, and I always do that. S Green 12. I imagine that you say, let me know when so I can be ready, like as far as money goes. The other good thing about shell 3D printing is that it's going to be so much more affordable. You can have a wall of shells. Once you get your one 3D printer and your spool of filament, you can start printing shells. And I mean, the designs will be out there, and I'm not going to be charging that much for the files. I want it to be reasonable to how much time I work on the shell versus like what you're getting. But you'll be able to just, anytime I come out with a new shell design, you'll be able to print it a day after I've released it. So it's going to be so amazing and so much cheaper, and you'll be able to resize it to your head because it'll be an STL file. So you'll be able to open it with, 3D modeling programs and fit it to your head and stuff. So that's more talk about face shell stuff, because that's always what people want to talk about. No, S Green asked if there are special lens magnets for the lens to attach. Typically on shells, there's, on this one you can see that there are the attachments for lenses, or for magnets. This one doesn't have that because this is for the moving lens. So the components are all going to be moving inside of here. There's not going to be, you can't do a magnet lens for that, because everything's inside of the shell if you think about it. So there isn't going to be like I will probably do a magnetic lens version, just a simpler, magnet in version. But I mean, this is so accessible. I don't see why you would want that at that point, because the moving lenses is going to be so cool. It's going to be such a crowd pleaser, because I'm really excited that this one is going to have a lot of movement. It's really going to move far. Because I've kind of solved some issues that I was having with my last mold. Okay, so I think the water in the plaster is kind of leaking through the 3D print, but it's still fine. Just getting some of those air bubbles out of the plaster, because if there are any air bubbles at the surface of the plaster, then what that's going to do is it's going to carve in when you vacuform it. It's going to press in, so you can't have that happen. So basically all this stuff should be available pretty soon. I'm hoping to have a working version in the next week or two, and then once that's ready and going, and I'm like ready to teach you how to do it, that's when I'll be releasing the files, because you'll need that when I'm teaching you. You'll need to have this shell essentially to use as your base for all of your hardware and everything that goes inside. But at that point, I'll have it designed so that the hardware will be so much easier to install. You'll just need to, put things in the places that they go. It'll be like an IKEA Spider-Man face shell. That's funny. Thanks, Degsy. Degsy said that basically that we'll be making a lot of people happy with this new format, because that's one of the biggest bummers with my work up to date is I'm just not good at getting it out there. I don't really make finished suits for myself. Even when people commission stuff, it takes me forever to get it to them. I'm just really not that great at getting to a finished product, and so things like this, like the shell and the process and stuff, are more fun for me, and so I'll be able to kind of focus on that. It's funny. Yeah, spiders are awesome. CAK just said he found a spider. That's the state of my current podcast tutorial stream here. So does anyone have any more questions about Plaster or Hydrocal or anything like that? Because otherwise, I think I'm pretty good for this stream. I think I've gotten most of the information out. If you have a container like this that has, excess plaster, just let it cure in the container. Don't dump it down the sink. I'm going to say that again. I said that at the beginning. Don't put plaster down the sink. Don't put, even this, you can see there's a little bit of like plaster dust at the bottom of the bucket. Even that plaster dust can kind of be dangerous if I were to just dump all of this out into the sink. So you just have to be careful of stuff like that. Yeah. Yeah, Eminem says he has a question about the moving lenses. I'm sure you can ask it. I'm being a little guarded with some of the stuff until I have my own working version. Basically, I want to make sure mine works before I go out telling you guys how I'm going to do it really in depth. I've already given a lot of information kind of over the course of different streams. So you could maybe figure out your own system based on kind of what I'm doing. But I lucked out because I got the 3D printer a couple of months ago, and it really has worked so well. Like the way I'm doing this lens buck, like the threshold, or the tolerance of everything, like the way I was able to just make it so that the lens is basically a perfect distance away from the shell for all of the moving components that go in between. I was going to say, glad you put that winky face, Matt. I could go over it all one more time. Plaster, water, mold, don't put it in the sink. And then, in a couple of streams, because I've wanted for a while to do a stream where I do a head cast, like a life cast of a head, because you need that if you're going to sculpt your own face shell. Like this was sculpted on Fernando's head. I did a life cast of Fernando Elfet, and with plaster bandages and stuff, and I've been using that. That's actually sitting up on the up on the shelf. Oh. I also, I kind of threw my back out last week on Thursday. Like when I did that stream, I was in great pain. So I'm still kind of in back pain. Like that wasn't fun. After sitting on the floor for so long. Okay. So this is the plaster bust that I did of Fernando's head, and it still has the ASM2 sculpt on it. But this is oil-based clay, but because I just left it in my dry, hot garage, it actually cracked. Like, water-based clay can sometimes. But if you keep it well preserved, oil-based clay won't do this. And you also can just kind of heat it up and kind of bring it back to life. This is actually the same sculpt that I did for the ASM1 shell too. I just basically altered the ASM1 sculpt into the ASM2 sculpt on this same bust and everything. So a neat little kind of bonus there. But that's, I sculpted that on Fernando's actual head bust here, and I cast that with Hydrocal. Well, actually, I think that's Plaster of Paris because it was so long ago. But I did the same process of casting and everything. S Green asked what I'm casting. This is actually the lens component to. Oh yeah, it's dripping a lot of water now. The lens component to the MCU shell. So it'll be pretty cool once I'm able to vacuform that and get that really precisely done. It's a really nice big plastic see-through lens that'll contain everything really nicely. So yeah, that's a pretty good stream for today. Not too much more to say about plaster, that type of stuff. And I know that I'll be doing more plastering in the future on my tutorial / podcast, I guess, because they're so long and so off tangent. Okay, so I'd say that's good for today. No more time spent in the hot garage for me. Thanks for tuning in, guys. It was a lot of fun. It's fun because my stream's kind of picking up a little bit of momentum. Today was a little. I know when I'm covering topics that are a little more boring to people based on people that tune in, but when I do stuff based on the MCU lenses, there's definitely a different energy, and I'm also starting to pick up more viewers and subscribers and stuff. So it's exciting. I'm really excited that this is all kind of panning out well, and it's unfocused right now. It kind of reminds me of when I'm at the beginning of a costume project. It's not the best, most accurate depiction, but it gives me somewhere to start and, something to do and to improve upon. And so I think that the stream will keep getting better and better, whether that's more first-person stuff or if it's more me kind of in my workshop filmed in front of the green screen stuff. I'm excited to just make it good quality stuff. Exciting stuff to come in the streams. And so basically, for those of you watching right now, the next time I'll be on will probably be Tuesday at 6 or 7. I'll be sure to announce it so that it's clear, not up in the air right up to 4 o'clock. Cool. So thanks for tuning in, guys. I really appreciate it. And I'll see you guys on Tuesday night.